All right, guys. Reed Orlando here with another episode of Reed ESPN Sports Podcast. I am fucking excited to talk about UFC 241. UFC 241 was unbelievable. Really, the whole main card was exciting. Even from the first fight, Derek Brunson and Ian Heinisch, very good fight. Now, before that, they had, why am I drawing a blank? Rafael Assunção versus Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen proven now to be a top 5 contender right now at bantamweight, and it's really hard to beat someone like Rafael Assunção. He's very crafty, and he knows how to circle to your weak hand really well, and he knows how to get you off balance. And really, Rafael Assunção has been a top 3 contender at bantamweight for the last 6 years since he beat TJ Dillashaw, then got injured, then fought TJ at UFC 200. He beat Marlon Moraes in Marlon's first ever fight in the UFC. Mind you, it was his debut. Obviously, you're going to have some ring jitters coming into a new organization, but still, Rafael Assunção is that impressive. And Corey Sandhagen, man, that's a really big win for him. I want to see who they match him up against next. Big prospect in the bantamweight division right now. Now, on the main card, the first fight of the night, Derek Brunson versus Ian Heinisch. I talked about that vividly within the first minute. I will say this, Derek Brunson was able to weather that storm. Derek Brunson's now on a 2-fight winning streak. He beat Elias Theodorou before this, and now he just beat Ian Heinisch. Now, Ian Heinisch had faster hands than him. He was really starting to piece him up in that first round, and I thought Derek Brunson was in some trouble. But he went back to his base. He started using his wrestling in that second and third round and had a nice comeback win. He won the last 2 rounds, and that was a big win for Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson, people forget, he's a very good wrestler. He's a D2 All-American. And that's what secured him that win in that fight. Big win there for Derek Brunson. Now, the next fight, we had Sadiq Youssef versus Gabriel Benitez. Let me just start off by saying Gabriel Benitez is one tough motherfucker. Sadiq Youssef hit him with a bunch of shots, and it didn't drop him. But all it takes is one right hand from Sadiq, and you're going to drop to the floor. And he followed up with those couple of right hands, and Herb Dean stopped it. So, Sadiq Youssef, what I find really interesting about him is just his power. He's another Nigerian, and these Nigerians are slowly starting to come over in MMA, as we've seen with Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, and now Sadiq Youssef. These guys are just freak athletes. And Sadiq, for 145 pounds, he is so fucking shredded. That guy would literally knock me out unconscious within 7 seconds, and I weigh about 170 pounds. It's just unbelievable the amount of power he has. Every time he hit Benitez, you could just see that Benitez was starting to get flustered by it. He kept moving backwards, and every time he hit him, whether it was in the forearms or he blocked the shot, you could tell it really hurt him. I wish I was sitting cage side or someone was sitting cage side just to be able to record the audio from those shots, because he has a ton of power. Now, I think that he's the most powerful featherweight in the world, besides Jeremy Stephens. Now, I would love to see those two actually fight. That would be a really interesting fight. I don't think they're going to do that. Sadiq isn't in the top 15, but he is on a 3-fight winning streak in the UFC. Technically a 4-fight because he won that Tuesday Night Contender Series fight. But he's 10-1. He's an absolute stud, and I think he is the future of the featherweight division right now. Big win for Sadiq Youssef. You really got to see how powerful he is, and you saw all his tools on display there in that fight. Very impressive win by him. Now, the next fight, this was my personal favorite fight of the night because you didn't know what the fuck was going to happen between Yoel and Paulo Costa. Now, Costa's pace and pressure, it's hard for anyone to really deal with. I mean, as soon as he got Yoel backed up even a little bit, he just started to unleash shots to the body, unleash it to the head. He really mixes his boxing up really well. Now, the argument could be made that Yoel Romero won that fight overall. And in my opinion, he probably did. I wish there was just one more round, because I would have scored that a draw. I would have given the third round a 10-8 to Yoel. And Paulo Costa, he won 10-9 in the first 2 rounds. Now, people said, oh, Yoel won the second round, he took him down, but it was like a 5-second takedown. It wasn't anything crazy. He did show control with the takedown, but the round did end right before it. So, yeah, I think if you were to actually score this fight as a whole, now, for those of you that don't know, in Pride, they would score fights as a whole. There was 2 10-minute rounds, and they would score the fight overall as a whole. I think that's what the UFC needs to do. The 10-point must system just doesn't work in MMA. There's obviously going to be a winner of the fight, no matter if it's 3 rounds, 5 rounds. You got to just go over the analytics. You got to see which shots carry more power, how many shots you landed, control on the floor. Overall, it's just there's so many factors that need to go in this algorithm on how to actually judge a fight. Now, I don't think the judges got it all wrong, but I do think it should have been a draw, or Yoel could have won that fight overall, because Yoel really started to pick it up in the third round, and Paulo was in trouble. really what stands out to me the most is that a 42-year-old man was able to go toe-to-toe with a 28-year-old phenom in MMA right now. Now, Paulo Costa, his boxing is really good. He's got very crisp hands. He's got so much power. I don't know how you get that big, as big as Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero, unless your mother banged the Hulk or someone like that. I don't know how these guys are so big. And for Yoel to be that big and that good of shape at 42 years old is really amazing. I don't know what's next for Yoel, but I will say what's next for Paulo Costa. It's got to be a fight with either Israel Adesanya or Robert Whittaker. I think he does deserve a title shot after those two fight, obviously. Beating Yoel is not easy at all. There's only been three people in the UFC that have been able to beat Yoel. And they've all been close fights. And the argument could be made that he won that fight against Robert Whittaker. So Paulo Costa, just unbelievable. His pace and pressure is nothing to be fucked with. He's got some of the best pressure in MMA right now. He just kept walking Yoel down. Even when he got clipped, he just stood in the pocket and weathered the storm. Now, my coach of the year right now for 2019 is Coach Eric Albarracán. He's Henry Cejudo's coach, who's the double champ in the UFC, Patricio Pitbull, who's the double champ in Bellator right now. So yeah, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Look at what he's done with these fighters. Look at what he just did with Paulo Costa. No one's been that besides Robert Whittaker, no one's been able to get to Yoel like Paulo Costa did. And my friends that have never seen Paulo Costa fight, they were super impressed by him. He's just a freak athlete. I can't say enough good things about him. He did start to wither in that third round, but it is what it is. He did get the win. The judges, I can't say they scored it wrong, but I would have scored it a little differently in my opinion. But it is what it is. Him and Adesanya, if Adesanya is able to beat Robert Whittaker, they already have a storyline there. Israel Adesanya called him the juice head and all this shit. So there's a little bit of a storyline there. There's a little bit of animosity. I think Paulo Costa's pretty pissed off about that statement. But you do look like you're on steroids, Paulo. I'm not going to lie to you. Normal people don't look like you. Now, I heard he lives at the gym, literally. That guy's training 7 days a week. He's working out like an animal. But it's just hard to be that big. But he is an absolute phenom. And hopefully the mainstream audience will catch on to Paulo Costa more now after this fight. Paulo Costa really burst onto the scene when he fought Johnny Hendricks back at that Madison Square Garden card 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And then he beat Uriah Hall at MSG last year. He's just a freak, and his pressure is just super hard to deal with. And the pace he puts on you is just relentless. And he's going to be a problem for anyone at middleweight. I definitely think he will be a future champion. Now, co-main event, Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis. Nate Diaz, that was one of the most impressive performances I've ever seen come out of him. Now, I just love how he adjusted his style to a 3-round fight. Typically, he's better off in these long fights. He figures out your timing in the first 2 rounds. He takes a couple of shots, a couple of unnecessary shots like we saw when he fought Conor the second time and the first time. But man, he pieced Pettis up, and he got Pettis on that back foot, and it really limited Pettis' striking ability. He wasn't able to land those leg kicks like I thought he was going to be able to. And in the clinch, Nate Diaz dominated. He was able to land some of those really nice clinched knees. And on the ground, a lot of people were saying, oh, that'll be really interesting if it hits the floor. And I definitely thought it would be interesting if it hit the floor. But, man, there are levels to this shit. Nate Diaz is a legit black belt. So is Anthony Pettis. He was throwing up a lot of submissions from his guard. He has a very active guard, I should say, Anthony Pettis. But Nate Diaz just neutralized everything, and he was able to pass his guard at will. He swept him once. I mean, it was just a really interesting fight, especially when it hit the floor. But Nate Diaz, man, he is the MVP. He is a needle pusher. I'm glad Dana White finally admits that, because you know what? Him and his brother have been superstars for a very long time, and the real MMA fans, the ones that have been entrenched in this for a very long time, know how good and how special the Diaz brothers are to MMA. Nate Diaz, he talks shit, but it's nothing personal. It's like, fuck you, bitch. It's nothing super disrespectful. He is who he is, and I love how he called out Jorge Masvidal after the fight. That fight is going to be fucking bonkers. I really can't think of a better fight right now in the UFC to make. That is the matchup to make. That needs to be a 5-round fight, though. It needs to be, it could be a pay-per-view, honestly. I mean, I'm sure after this pay-per-view, I think they sold probably at least over 500,000 buys just off of Nate Diaz alone. And then you had the second fight between DC and Stipe. But I just think that Nate Diaz is a special motherfucker. And what he was able to do after a 3-year layoff, mind you, is one of the most impressive performances I've ever seen, especially a guy like Anthony Pettis, who's on a hot streak right now. You submit Michael Chiesa, who Michael Chiesa is a legit black belt, and we've seen what he's been able to do at welterweight. He absolutely dominated Diego Sanchez in that last fight. And then he knocks out Wonder Boy. So that's just a super impressive win for Nate. He pressured him. He had a perfect game plan. Pettis, he wasn't flustered. He couldn't deal with the reach. He just couldn't deal with the volume that Nate was going to throw either. And Nate, the thing that intrigues me the most about Nate is nothing he throws is ever 100%. But the volume he throws, it just accumulates over time, and it just wears you down after a while. We saw that against Anthony Pettis. That was a 3-round unanimous decision win for Nate. In the post-fight press conference, he was talking a lot of crazy shit. He was high as a motherfucker, Nate. That's what it sounded like to me. He was just saying, yeah, there's no real fights for me. The Pettis fight intrigued me. That's why I came back. He was saying Nick Diaz Army, that needs to be a T-shirt. I would really like to see his brother come back. And they even asked him if Nick was coming back anytime soon. It's not looking great. Nick's having a good time. He's always hanging out with AJ Agazarm. And I don't know. I miss Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz was that motherfucker. I'm glad Nate's getting all the respect and love that he deserves right now, but I really miss Nick. And what else can I talk about with the Nate and Anthony Pettis fight? Really, he just walked him down. He pressured him. He neutralized the leg kick that Pettis was throwing on him. He kept him on his back heel. It was just a really good performance out of Nate. Now, in the main event, DC versus Stipe. All right. That was the most impressive comeback in a title fight I have ever seen. Another one that stands out to me, I hate to admit it, and it was for an interim title, was when Conor McGregor fought Chad Mendes. He was losing those first 2 rounds and then uncorked that left hand on him and put him out. It was just amazing to see Stipe Miocic adjust mid-fight like that, and to be able to realize that it's not working me going to the head. Let me switch it up to the body. And he brought up something really interesting in the post-fight show, that he was talking about it a couple of weeks before with his coaches, that no one really has hit DC to the body. And the only person that has was Anderson Silva back at UFC 200 when Anderson front kicked him in the side. And DC was hurt. That was the end of the 3rd round, and DC was definitely hurt. And I think he saw an opening, and he really he went for it. And it worked out beautifully for him. Stipe Miocic, man, that was the most impressive performance I've ever seen out of him. Is he the greatest heavyweight of all time? If you go by the numbers, sure, he has the most title defenses at heavyweight. But I think they need to run it back. They need the 3rd fight. Now, DC, he was definitely upset after the fight. Rightfully so. He was winning those first 2 rounds. He was really piecing them up with the hands. And Stipe got out of the way of some really powerful left hands powerful left hooks, I should say, that DC was throwing at him. And DC asked after the 2nd round, he goes, am I winning the fight? And the coaches said yes. I think that might have been a mistake to tell him that, because I think he let off the gas a little bit. And I also think that he might have gotten a little tired because of how much energy he exerted in the first 2 rounds. But when he was using his wrestling, DC, I mean, he was dominating that fight. He had that beautiful takedown in the 1st round. Stipe even took him down in the 4th round. But DC doesn't really care about that because he'll get right back up to his feet in 2 seconds. But man, definitely a heartbreaker for DC. I picked DC to win that fight. But Stipe he shocked the world again. Stipe shocked the world again. That was a hell of a comeback. That was the best adjustment I've ever seen in a title fight. And it just showed you that championship mentality of Stipe. He refused to give up. After those first 2 rounds, man, he was bruised up. His face was all fucked up. DC was landing some really nice combinations, and he was able to get inside that pocket really well. I said in my pre-fight show, which I wound up deleting because it was kind of half-assed, I was saying how DC does a really good job of getting into the pocket and is able to unload his hands. Now, Stipe had an 8-inch reach advantage, and he was still able to get inside the pocket and land those shots. Now, I think if DC would have used his wrestling more, he could have won. But it's just interesting because every time the AKA fights in California, I believe they're 1-3 in title fights. I mean, Luke Rockhold got knocked out, DC got knocked out by John Jones, and then DC just got knocked out again. What's it called? Just got knocked out again in California. I think Kane might have lost in California. AKA does not do well in California for some reason. I'd be curious to look up the numbers, but I'm almost positive they're like 1-3 or 1-4 in title fights in California, which is their home state. So I think DC he's got one more left in him. This is a legacy fight. Let's see who's the greatest heavyweight of all time. If they were to fight again, I'd pick DC. I'm certainly happy for Stipe, but I was rooting for DC on that one. He's just, I don't know. He just made one little mistake, and that's all it took, and DC was able to finish him. Little Daniel, his little kid, was upset about it, and DC was like, don't cry, don't cry. And I just respect Daniel Cormier so much as a man that it hurts me to see him lose. Him and Stipe, these are two of the most class acts in the UFC, in my opinion. Sure, DC's had some skeptical moments when he's beefing with John Jones back and forth. But, man, you can't take away both of their bodies of work. DC is definitely one of the greatest fighters of all time, and I hope he just recovers and he'll get back on the horse, and maybe they'll get something going by March, or maybe they'll get something going by MSG. I don't know, though. He did get TKO'd, so we'll see about that. I'm trying to think. Any other takeaways from the fight? Really, my performers of the night, I got to give it to Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz put on a hell of a show. Him and Stipe are definitely my performers of the night. Sadiq did really well, too. So, yeah, that's really it for UFC 241. Unbelievable card, unbelievable night of fights. It lived up to expectations. And a lot of the times when these cards are stacked like that, they don't necessarily live up to the expectations. This 100% did. The prelims were good, but the main card, really from Sadiq Youssef up, you could even say Derek Brunson up, were unbelievable. Sadiq Youssef, like I said, top prospect right now at featherweight. I think he could beat most of the people within the top 10 right now. Nigeria, the takeover is real. Kobe Covington was there, and so was Tyron Woodley. Everyone was booing Kobe Covington in the ring. He's playing his cards right, man. Kobe, he talks a lot of shit, and you pretty much forget about how good of a fighter he actually is. Kobe is that good. Him and Kamaru is going to be an unbelievable fight when they officially schedule that. So we'll see. What other events do we got coming up? I'm going on the laptop right now and keep this one going. But yeah, I'd be curious. What did you guys think about UFC 241? Did you think this was the best card of 2019? I do not. I think UFC 240 actually was a better card, but those last three fights were really unbelievable, and they definitely lived up to expectations. So let's see. What do we got going on event-wise? Oh, Henry Cejudo was there, sitting next to Uriah Faber. I would not be surprised if they booked that. If they made that Cejudo's next fight after his ACL. He's out for a while, but I could see him fighting. I could definitely see him fighting. What's it called? Uriah Faber next. Now, Henry Cejudo is definitely cringy, but I love the guy. He's a champion at the highest level. He's the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. And really, the next event we have for the UFC, we have Jessica Andrade versus Weili Zhang. Weili Zhang is my girl. I've been down with Weili Zhang since she's been in the UFC. She's on a 21 fight win streak, I believe, with 17 finishes. That's really impressive, especially in the women's divisions. You don't really see that a lot of the time. And Andrade is a killer. We saw what she did to Rose Namajunas. I think it'll be a lot different fight against Weili Zhang. Weili Zhang can come forward. She's a very aggressive fighter, and so is Andrade. So I think they're both going to meet in the middle and bang. That is August 31st. There's really not much else going on. I think they're going to take a nice little 2-week break. And then after that, in September 7th, you have Khabib versus Poirier. John Jones made a comment that Stipe Miocic is the greatest heavyweight of all time, kind of a little dig to Daniel Cormier. Those two are always going to be connected to each other no matter what. I know DC says, what kind of rivalry is it if I lost twice in a row? But it definitely enhanced the sport. It brought my eyes into the sport, and that's one of the greatest rivalries in UFC history. Rooting for DC. Hopefully he'll get a nice comeback. And yeah, Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal, that is the fucking fight to make. I hope they schedule that as soon as possible, please. I'm praying to the MMA gods, a.k.a. Dana White, to make that shit happen. That is going to be off the charts. I don't even know where they can put that fight. Like, they got to put it in Vegas, I think. It's got to be a 5-round fight. So let's see what happens with that. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode of ESPN Sportscast. I will get something going this week just in terms of MMA news and just a general discussion. I'm going to try to get some guests coming on soon. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.